Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the Slowtwitch podcast. I am joined, as always, by the one, the only, the principal, Eric Wynn. Eric,
Hey,
how are you?
I'm good, Ryan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well.
2 weeks in a row.
I think we actually skipped a week.
No, we recorded last week.
No, it was the week before.
No, it came out last week. So.
Oh, God. I'm all screwed up. Well,
don't mind. I could be wrong.
What else is new? But hey, we are joined this week by a special guest, the one and only Jimmy Riccitello. Jimmy, how are you?
I'm awesome. Thanks for having me, you guys. Been a while.
So, we're here to kind of dissect a little bit of what has changed and what has certainly not changed in the Ironman rulebook for 2024 as we're gearing up for the kickstart of the new Ironman Pro Series with Oceanside right around the corner. So lots of excitement in the pro triathlon world right now. Super deep pro list too. It's an incredible number of people racing.
I think we're at 114 right now, total, men and women. That's always a big debut, but jeepers, that's cool.
I know. It's fascinating because the PTO can't even pay enough pros to fill their race, yet you guys have 120 pros showing up.
Yeah, Oceanside it's an iconic venue, right?
It is. I'm sad I'm missing it.
Oh, jeepers. Well, it's always awesome to be at that one. It's where the sport started for me, honestly. It's just a special venue. So
Jimmy, let's back up before we start getting into the rule book. You know, you've just mentioned that Oceanside was really kind of where you got started in triathlon. Tell us how you got started and kind of how you wound up doing what you're doing today with Ironman.
How much time do we have?
I will time you. Don't worry.
No, the brief story. I was a crummy swimmer in high school. Not good enough to swim in college. I went to the University of Arizona, studied architecture. I swam a little bit, and I took a water polo class from a guy named George Dallum, who was a triathlete, an esteemed triathlete here, our local hero guy, which honestly I didn't know the sport existed back then. But I was impressed with George as an athlete, and kind of wanted to be like him. So I started running. I rode my bike to school every day. So, didn't have a car, so I had that going for me. And anyways, I jumped in a race and did okay. The following year in 85, I went to USTS Phoenix, which was our big, kind of the equivalent of the 70.3 back then, and, a big series of Olympic distance races, and got second to Tinley. Actually got disqualified in that race for being a domestique to an athlete that you guys probably know, prominent Slowtwitch guy, who sat on my wheel the whole race, and nobody knew who I was, so they assumed I didn't do the swim. This is 85, mind you, right? So wasn't televised, wasn't. Anyways, I was like, I did the swim, and to be my peers backed me up. Yeah, he was in the water. I was right next to him, and so they reinstated me, but they got rid of the guy who was in second. That moved me up from third to second, and the rest is history. And it's so. Hey,
wait, who was the guy?
Oh, I'll let you guys figure that out. You have to go back and look at the results, and because he would never draft.
I have a sneaking suspicion.
A free T-shirt for anyone that could figure it out and post it on the forum.
Tinley might know. So anyways, I became aware of the rules and officiating in 85, and it was a focus of mine. It became a big athlete advocate on the rules side, to the extent of getting on the athletes advisory board that I think USA Tri organized back in the day. When I wanted to affect the rules, I was told, hey, you know, by the USAT commissioner officials that, you know, he personally didn't write the rules. And if I wanted to affect change, that I needed to get on the board of directors for USAT, which I did. I spent 6 years there. Was for the most part horribly ineffective, but it was an awesome learning experience, and it really clued me into the politics of the sport. And then fast forward to 2005, Ironman asked if I would help out in the officiating side when they were doing that on their own. I initially didn't want to do it, but then decided, you know, what better way to put my money where my mouth was and have an input. And so it started primarily as a way to liaise between Ironman and the pros specifically, but then it just morphed into, you know, helping create a sustainable ecosystem of refs, primarily in the US. And then it just mushroomed out into some oversight globally. And now my position with Ironman it's changed over the years. I'm not the head referee of Ironman. We don't have that position anymore. But I'm overseeing rules and special projects. So still, you know, things like Race Ranger, still liaising with World Tri on rules consistency, things like that. So that's my history in a nutshell. I'm leaving out all the times I won triathlons around the world and, you know, things like that. But that's you know, you can have me on another time and I can tell you how awesome I was. The older I get, the better I was, by the way. But
naturally, right? So backing up for a second, but this ties into kind of everything, right? Like, so why is there an Ironman specific rule book and not necessarily, you know, like either following the home national governing body or, you know, in the case of World Triathlon, right? Like it kind of ties back to like Ironman's stance with world, like the prior World Triathlon ITU.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, on the first page of our rule book, it says the Ironman competition rules are based on the World Triathlon competition rules, and we've put on events all over the world, 50 countries, I think, and we're using, you know, like USA Triathlon for Oceanside, right, and the DTU for Ironman Germany, and so the refs there are educated based on the World Triathlon competition rules. So our rules are substantively the same, right? There's subtle differences, uniforms, and maybe a couple of other things. But as far as 12 meters, penalty tents, and all those other things, we align. And it's been give and take over the years with them. They've made a lot of changes based on input we've given them. We've adopted rules and policies that they have. But to kind of answer your question a bit more directly, when I started in 2005, USA Tri was very different than ITU at the time, which is now World Triathlon. And we, you know, because we had athletes coming from all over the world to Kona. I mean, even back then, I think it was. Well, I'm gonna misspeak, but 50% of the athletes came from outside the U.S., you know, roughly. So it was in our best interest, you know, to that their equipment that they bring, you know, with them and use in Europe could also be used in the U.S. And, you know, you just look at the helmets, right? Back in the day, right? I mean, you had to have a helmet that had a CPSC sticker. But if you bought your helmet in Europe, it at a bike shop from Giro, a Giro bike helmet, you know, to be sold in that shop over there, the standard was CEN or CE. And, you know, for a while, USAT wasn't keen on you know, they wanted everybody to have that helmet. And so we wanted a rule book that was more aligned with what the rest of the world was doing. So we went to USAT and asked for permission to use a rule book that was more similar at the time to ITU. You remember back in the day, I mean, USAT's draft zone was 7 meters, 3 bike links, right? And we wanted a bigger one. So we asked for permission. They granted it, which was awesome. And then the only issues we had were that, Ironman events had rules that were vastly different from USAT's. And so then over the years, diplomacy wise, we've been working closely with USAT to try to nudge them towards this global rules harmony project that we kind of started years ago, and are still involved in. And now, as of 2023 and 22, I think USAT and World Tri are on the same page. And so, everything's cool now, but there were differences. Ironman didn't, made you wear a shirt in a triathlon, and you could go to the Tucson Tri and race in your Speedo only, which was obviously fine by me if you've seen the pictures. But anyway, it's just a matter of all getting on the same page, and it's still a work in progress. But I think that answered your question, I hope.
Yeah. Where would you say the biggest gap remains between, say, the Ironman rules and World Triathlon at this point?
Honestly, there's no big gap, really, Ryan. I mean, I think the uniforms is still something, that World Tri is geared more towards that, the World Tri World Championship type of thing, where you go in with the USAT kit, right? And if you're a USAT national member, you buy your kit from whoever makes the national team kits. They're all uniform, look the same. Their events were typically shorter, and then in Ironman events, you need to be, hydration, heat management, all these factors came into play that they didn't really need to focus on. To give you an example, and I think the uniforms, Ryan, to answer your question, and is the biggest gap, and it's not very big, but they, World Tri had a few years ago that you couldn't even have a zipper on the front of your kit. It had to be on the back. And so we're like, hey, right, you guys, here's what people are wearing nowadays. And they're like, okay, cool. They put that in. But then their rule still says you can only unzip to your sternum. And we're like, that doesn't work for us. It's impossible to enforce that. We can't. Number one, we certainly don't want to zip anybody's kit up for them. So the compromise was it just has to be connected at the bottom at Ironman events versus being zipped up to your sternum. So,
yeah, and to that point, right? Like with the going to uniforms specifically, right? Like this was one of the things where, wording has changed slightly over the years in terms of how far you can unzip your kit in an Ironman event. And so, like at this point, for clarity, it's to where the bottom of the zipper is. It's just got to stay connected. There isn't the, policing of how far exactly down your sternum. Because I was there getting told, like it was just too far down my chest.
Zip it up. Right. And I mean, I remember running next to, getting a call. I forget which pro in Kona, one of the leaders. The zipper kept creeping down. He kept zipping it up. You could see on TV. He's like, shit, and anyway, he had gone to the lengths of literally sewing things into, sewing stitches around the midpoint so that it wouldn't go down, but they broke. Anyway, it's a crazy rule, and having the zipper connected at the bottom is a bit funky, but it was a compromise that we made, and World Tri has been really cool, honestly. And as far as listening to our the practical issues that we have, enforcing some of the rules and making tweaks if necessary. But I think they just want your kit to be connected and not flapping around, and not solely because of the cosmetics of it, but there's some decency laws and things like that. I think that they're working around. But to the greatest extent possible, we want people to be comfortable and not have to stress too much. I personally, it's a funky rule, but I don't think it's too much to ask for the zipper to be connected at the bottom, yet people still want to, wait for us to tell them to connect it at the bottom. And that's it for the drags of officiating.
Okay. So let's recap here for a second. Right.
Okay.
So World Triathlon ultimately is the one writing the rule book.
That's the starting point for sure.
Yeah. That's the starting point. And then based on those rules and the need to alter those rules, Ironman decides what should be changed based around the differences in races and the types of races and the things that the athletes need to do in those races to make sure that the athletes can be as safe and also, let's just say, as comfortable as possible. Is that kind of a fair statement?
Almost, Eric. I think I would say decide is a strong word. I think that we assess their rule book, and then again, based on the challenges that athletes do in our events have with certain rules, especially ones that don't really affect fair play, for like make you faster necessarily, without getting into the argument.
Yeah, well, you just use an example of uniforms, right? Like, World Triathlon, they're most of their events are short course, they're draft, they're not out there for 8, 10, 12 hours, right? 16 hours.
Right.
And so, clearly a rule of you can't have a zipper in the front isn't going to work for an Ironman athlete.
Yeah.
If we want the sport to grow. I mean, technically it could,
correct.
but that's going to suck, right? So Ironman looks at all of those and says, okay, we need to probably adapt these rules, and this is how we're going to do it.
Yeah, we would take our thoughts, Eric, which are similar to what you just said. We go to them and say, look, this rule is unenforceable at our events. Understand why you need to have it, but can we tweak it? Or, hey, our athletes are doing, they're out there for 16 hours, and this uniform policy that you guys have is, so we would ask them to consider changing their rules and amending their rules. And so there is now a zipper allowed on the front of your race kit at World Triathlon, middle and long distance triathlon. So I think we've historically done our best to try to align with them and not sort of decide on our own. There are things like the zipper connected at the bottom is still not in the World Tri Rulebook, and maybe something like that will be in the 25 Rulebook for them, or maybe they'll even go a step further. Who knows? But once they look at all these issues and make changes for 25, we'll see. But I guess the point I want to make is that it's more of a diplomatic process, right? We go to them and they've, like I said, have been really helpful with respect to rules in listening to our feedback, just like the feedback you gave. They've been great at listening to that and amending their rules to meet our practical needs if it makes sense for them. And when it doesn't, they're like, yeah, that doesn't really work for us. And then we try to
are there any
meet at the sternum.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or at the bottom of the
zip. And I think the other aspect is when you're to kind of go over is, Jimmy, when you're looking at adapting rules, you're not just looking to adapt rules for professional athletes. Like, you have to create a rule that is for every single participant out on the race course. Correct?
Yeah. I mean, Eric, that is, yes, we have events where age groupers and pros, as you guys know really, really well, they're on the course together, not at the same time, but commingled, if that's the right word. They're together, literally. And so it would be very difficult. And we do still have a few challenges, the age group are allowed to slipstream when they pass and the pros aren't. But for the most part, the pro rules and age group rules are the same. But yes, we have constraints, practical constraints that we have to consider when we go there, because we have, for the most part, everyone's on the course at the same time, if that makes sense. I mean, you guys know that we send the pros first and then age groupers, but multi-loop course, you get it. And so, yeah, that is a big part of our rule discussions, and why something that other people use rule wise might not work well for us, or work at all, frankly.
Yeah. So
we've established who Jimmy is, right? We've established your history, why you're here, why you're in charge of these things. You're passionate about it. You've I would say dedicated the last couple of decades of your life to try to make a meaningful impact. And what I would classify as, putting your arms around what could be a massively confusing, situation to try to organize it better. We understand that the governing body of the sport, World Triathlon, is ultimately responsible for the rules. And Ironman works directly with them as other organizations to make sure that those rules are and can be enforced. And if they really can't, to try to adapt those rules to where they can be enforceable in a practical way long term within the sport. Now, rules change all the time because that's what rules do, right? Somebody decides that they're going to, create havoc over here and make us create a rule, right? Now, in 2024, you introduced new rules. And I think for the first time in a long time, you got a lot of grief over these rule changes. And so now I want to talk about, and I'm going to shut up here in a second and let Ryan and Jimmy talk about these, but I don't really see that there's a whole lot of new rules being changed, but you would think with the buzz in the industry that like you guys just took the rule book and threw it out and created a whole new one. So now I just want to talk about what's new and why and what's the big deal.
All right. That's a good lead in. Ryan?
So I actually have one last one off of the uniform discussion because, there's the big example. Matt Sharp got DQ'd at Ironman 70.3 Main last year for effectively, quote unquote, Zippergate, right? And some of the language specifically around uniforms and zippers changed just a little bit, which I think is, effectively an answer to give officials a little bit more discretion in that specific scenario. So you don't have either you don't call it or DQ. Like you don't have an effective death penalty for it.
Yeah, Ryan. I mean, that's certainly, nobody, we get the rule and it has to be there. But yeah, I think that change, and like a few others, was made with that notion in mind for sure. Yeah, you're hitting the nail on the head.
And so, obviously the topics that are most near and dear to slow twitchers are anything related to the bike, right? Like if it's bike related, it's going to be, just like catnip to our forum. And so, probably the biggest, highlight is what I'm just labeling the Joe Skipper rule, right? With regard to, anything in your jersey, like a hydration bladder or something like that, as well as kind of like the fairing rules that are existing out there. So, what was kind of the process behind, realizing, hey, this is taking, this a little too far down a rabbit hole, and coming up with this year's rules around that.
Are you talking about every single professional athlete shoving a bunch of stuff down their front jersey now, Ryan? Is that what we're talking about?
Joe did it first, so
Did he?
It's the Joe Skipper rule.
I don't know if he did.
Well, I need a jersey for Iron Man. I need a jersey for Iron Man because it's got to be bigger so that I can shove a bunch of stuff down my jersey on the bike. And then I need another jersey on the run because I don't shove a bunch of stuff down my jersey because I'm not trying to get as aerodynamic. Is that what we're finally talking about?
But also, like the water bottles as fairings around his arms, right? Like it was kind of like he took it to, the practical limit.
Yeah, he did.
He did, yeah. And with respect to water bottles down the front of the shirt, I'm not sure if he did it first. He certainly did it the best, or worst, depending on how you think about it. But initially when I started seeing it at events, when I started noticing it at events, and refs would come up, what do you think about this? And I'm like, from a rule standpoint, you ask the athlete what they're doing, and it's like, well, it's, I got a bottle at an aid station and my cages were full and I didn't want to litter. I put the bottle down the front of my shirt and I drank from it, by the way. So it's not a fairing, it's a water bottle. I'm using it to drink. I don't want to litter. And I think it got traction from the pros because refs were I don't mean this in a bad way. We're clueless to the fact that practice, somebody figured out that it saved you 5 watts or whatever it is. I'm making up the 5 watts based on bits I've read. I have no proof of that, but it's certainly faster, I think. And so once the real reason for doing it came about was that it was faster, because other pros were in the same boat as us. They're like, why is this athlete doing that? And once they figured it out, with their own testing, they all started doing it. And because it saved 5 watts, if you didn't do it, you were giving up 5 watts. So you did it, even if you didn't want to do it. And then it was not a round water bottle. It was some sort of shaped water bottle. And then it was, anyways, it started to trickle down, of course, to the age groupers because it is faster. It's a $5 or however much water bottles cost these days. Solution, you're not spending $1,000 on a pair of aero bars. So it was an easy thing for people to do. It started to get out of hand. I mean, if you read the rule that addresses that, 501M in our rule book, it sort of said you couldn't put anything in under your race kit for the purpose of, that was deemed to give you an aero advantage. I'm paraphrasing. But again, nobody really thought that a water bottle in the front of your kit was doing that. And once it was known that it was, and that's what it was for, I talked to World Tri and they're like, yeah, we don't feel like our rules, well, it doesn't specifically address that. The intent is to not allow that. We saw the change made in the World Tri appendix that's specific to the T100 events. It said no water bottles. It's coming, right, for 2025 in the general rule amendments for World Tri. So we're getting a head start and just letting athletes know that they can't do that. So, that's how, like you said earlier, a lot of the rule book intends to prohibit a lot of things, but it's not specifically stated because the people that wrote the rules years ago didn't know what was coming, and so, we're constantly having to interpret the old verbiage. Does it apply to new stuff? And bottom line is, athletes need to know that they shouldn't put things down the front of their kit. Not they shouldn't. They can't put things down the front of their kit.
Can't.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think to that point about, old language potentially, needing continuous interpretation, right? Like going back to the fairing discussion, right? Because when you talk about, oh, no protrusions off of the head tube or anything else, like some of our forum members are now concerned, right? Like all these bikes come with integrated hydration on the front of them, right? And it's like, well, is that legal? Or, is that something where it's like, oh, okay, like this is a place where the language isn't necessarily totally aligned with what our intent is here.
Basically, people, rightfully so, are worried that some, official is going to come in that is having a bad day and take it out on something that probably, if you saw, would be fine with, but they're not going to be able to go on a bike ride during the actual race because, there's this arbitrary thing that is in a rule book. And I mean, it's a thing, it's a real
thing. It is
thing.
a thing. It is a thing, Eric. And that's certainly my concern and in my role as well, is that, there's some sort of standards in place. And that's what ongoing discussions with World Tri are trying to get at. Hey, what are you telling your referee base, the World Triathlon Certified Refs, many of which we use at our events? What are you telling them? What's coming, so that we can let our athletes know what they should do and what they shouldn't. And the highlighted green portions that were out there really weren't changes. They were clarifications made with that in mind. Like you said earlier about littering, Ryan, and so yeah. Anyway, I think I kind of lost my train of thought. Now, remind me, Eric, what I was talking about or what I was trying to answer.
The
hydrate,
like someone's water bottle on the front end of their bike, right? Like,
yes,
it's integrated hydration that is supposed to come from the bike. Like, by the letter of the rule, like it could be interpreted as being problematic.
Yeah,
is it?
Probably not. No, I think that certainly we didn't substantively change anything. We've called attention to the fact that the rule isn't super specific, but definitely want to take the opportunity to let the Slowtwitch viewers know that nothing's changing from last year, and if somebody shows up with something crazy, that a ref looks at and is like, oh my gosh, this has taken front mounted water hydration system to the extreme. Same questions they had about Joe Skipper's Aerobar setup when he had the bottles outside of his arms. Hey, never seen this before. And, well, they're water bottles, and okay, they're arrow-shaped water bottles, but what's the big deal? I'm going to drink out of them, and this is where I chose to put them. So two things, trying to figure out whether or not that's allowed per the rules. And then, revising a rule to be more clear on what is and what isn't allowed. So nothing that's been approved and passed through the eyes of referees up to this point should be prohibited. There's going to be the odd one-off here, there, somewhere around the world where a ref comes in and makes a decision on their own. But hopefully, certainly at Ironman events, when we get a question like that, especially if it's a pro, they'll call me and go, hey, the referee's questioning these aero bars. And I get a picture of it and, get on the phone with the ref. I'm like, maybe you need to talk to World Tri and get some clarity from them. If they do, World Tri says it's okay, problem solved. And if it's something that I know is okay, I do my best to convince the head ref officiating the event that, hey, that equipment's okay. I mean, it's on 1,000 of the age groupers' bikes. Go look. And, then make a note. Hey, this is for discussion. We've got to keep doing our best to get everybody on the same page with officiating best practices and the rules in general, how they're interpreted.
Okay, let's talk about this for a second, because I think this is a pretty good time to call out some reasons why there are rules, right? Jimmy, I have seen you on multiple times before a race even starts, be asked a question by a pro if a piece of equipment is legal or not. I have also seen you and other referees multiple times have to deal with somebody that comes race morning with something that is very questionable, throwing a
Mm-hmm.
conniption fit that you won't allow it on the race course. So if you're a professional athlete or if you're an age grouper and you are trying to push the envelope of the letter of the law with something, whether it's a prototype, whether it's in anything, is it fair to say that there is plenty of time before the day of the race to get clarification from an official at the race on whether or not that piece of equipment is going to be allowed or not before you show up race morning and have a panic attack?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're going to answer those emails. They're going to get to us, whether the question goes to athlete services. This is for Ironman events. But yeah, there's tons of time if somebody wonders or they're given a piece of equipment from one of their sponsors that, they're like, man, I'm not so sure about that. There's plenty of time to ask those questions. And, race morning is not the best place. And if your questionable equipment causes you heartburn on race morning, you probably should have asked about it earlier. And then, of course, yeah. Anyway, that's it in a nutshell. Yes, there's ample time, and I don't think the pathway to get an answer it's not a difficult one to find. It's pretty easy
What
to
is the
figure out
pathway? Is there a
well,
general email box that people can email?
yeah. I mean, there's my email address, which they could get, but if they send something to Ironman, that
We'll make sure
says,
we put your email address in the
yeah,
article that
yeah.
goes
Thank
up
you for
to
that. Yeah. And it's,
Is there a general
you,
email box that we could put up in the article?
yeah. I mean, I don't have the address for you. I'm
Sure,
embarrassed
yeah,
to
yeah.
say,
It's,
but I'm sure I can get that for
I'm
you.
pretty
But
sure it's athlete
it
services at
athlete
ironman.com, but
services is
Yeah,
typically
the
where,
intern.
yeah. Well, I get any questions about rules and equipment that isn't obvious pushed to me, and then if it's not obvious to me, then I then seek clarity wherever I need to, and that's the process that the athletes need to go to. And if they send a question about equipment legality to Ironman via email, it's gonna get to me. And usually I copy the event specific head referee so that they're aware that this athlete, it has questions and what was told to them. And that's the general process of how it works.
you have no
Okay.
idea how happy you have made slow twitchers with 3D printers.
Is that sarcastic?
No, no,
Or are they
I'm
actually
not.
related?
No, you're going to wind up with some interesting
Yeah.
elements to
So,
certain things.
well, that's, yeah. And that's another topic. I mean, the rules, there's definitely something I make in my garage, even if I have a 3D printer, that you've got to, you can't just strap something together and ride it. You've got to, it's got to go through safety testing and whatnot. That's what companies that sell products have to do, right? And so the current rules don't allow somebody to make something themselves and use it without getting it safety tested. The problem, as you guys know, is, man, there's some slick stuff out there. It's not easy for a referee they don't have a Rolodex of every single company that makes aero equipment for triathletes and cyclists. So it's hard to spot. But if somebody shows up with something that's noticeably unsafe looking, primarily, that's the key, or that's just way out there in terms of the fairing rule relative to the fairing rule, they're gonna get questioned on it, and it's gonna get escalated. And if it's not
So-
safe, they're going to be told they can't use it by a referee
Right.
or anybody that notices it.
As they
So
should.
that concept
Yes.
of the Rolodex, that specifically ties into kind of the next point, which is, there's been the alignment of the Ironman rulebook with World Triathlon and, World Athletics regarding shoe stack height and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm absolutely positive that not every referee is going to know the difference between, the multiple versions of Saucony's Kinvara, one of which is on the prohibited list, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in the case of, I'm a shoe geek, I can tell the difference between those shoes. Like, if I see that on a competitor's feet during, say, Ironman Lake Placid, which I'm racing this year,
Right on.
but a referee hasn't said anything, like, do I have recourse to be able to report that to somebody? And if I do, great. How do I do it? And if I don't, well, why not?
Yeah, I mean the competition rule, the Ironman competition rules, and World Tri too, allow protests. Okay, and there's a lot. That's a whole nother podcast that we could do. You guys, call me next week, and we'll do a podcast on protests and appeals. But all athletes have the right to protest against another athlete. Their eligibility, for example, or like, hey, this person's in the 30 to 34 age group, but they're 50 years old, or vice versa. Or this person is using a shoe that's not legal. And you guys, I get it. You're not shoe experts, but I know this shoe. And so you would file this protest post race, and the process is outlined. But basically, if you speak to a referee, it doesn't even have to be a formal protest, right? I mean, you could say, look, this shoe this person's using is not legal. You guys need to check it out. They're going to do their due diligence. They're going to go check the shoe out, take pictures of it. And if it's one of those, I think 4 shoes now that are on the prohibited list on our website, they'll unfortunately get disqualified. So the thing that's the way a lot of these things work too, Ryan. I mean, we'll get a complaint from another athlete like, this is not cool. Have you seen what this athlete's using? And it's in a transition area with thousands of bikes. And even though, refs are doing walkthroughs, they're not, spending time on scrutinizing each individual bike and each part on each bike. So a lot of times we're acting on information that we get via protest or just an informal protest. Like, this person used a wetsuit in a non-wetsuit swim, or, this person's using an illegal shoe. So your pathway is to talk to the head referee post race, let them know that you think an athlete's using a piece of equipment that's prohibited, and then the head referee will investigate. And if they find that there's credibility, sometimes it's impossible. Like, hey, this person was using headphones in a race, and we didn't notice it during the race, and we can't find it on any finisher picks. But there's lots of ways we have to validate somebody's protest. But a lot of things people do, they do on parts of the course, and not on others, because they're devious. And then other people are just ignorant. I don't mean like that in a mean way. I just mean they didn't know, so they did something, you stop them. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I had no clue. And anyway.
So the kind of the last question that I have about changes to the rule book and everything else, like it kind of ties into this, right? So, protests, appeals, like they're all based on rules that, aren't up to a referee's discretion, right? Like, you have to have something that's a little bit more black and white, say like the shoe rule. And so, one area that's always kind of been a point of contention, particularly within, the pro group, has been the drafting rules, right? And, like the enforcement of them, when penalties are applied and everything else. And so you have Race Ranger coming on board for the Pro Series this year, which, gives you a very visual indicator. And the cool thing about the rear element of Race Ranger is that it records data, so you're able to see how long an athlete spent in somebody's draft zone. I'm intrigued by the fact that drafting remains a referee's discretion penalty, despite the fact that you have this now like a harder and fast data set sitting in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain why it stayed the same?
Yeah, I mean, their racing, as you guys know, is super dynamic, and there's lots of reasons why a person might encroach in the other person's draft zone without passing. Maybe that person slowed for some reason. They feathered the brakes. You're in your aero bars. You don't see what they see. Maybe you're fifth in line, they're first in line, and there's a compression. Referees are going to do what they've always done, which is assess the situation and try to figure out if it's situational or if the person got an unfair advantage. Refs aren't mind readers. I mean, in the perfect world, intent would be like I'm not saying it's not a factor, but it's really hard to determine that, right? I mean, we're not mind readers, but did they get an unfair advantage? Did something they do, was something they did inherently unsafe? They're going to factor all those things in before they make a decision. And so a light may flash red. Somebody may go from 12 meters to 11 for a second and back out. The ref, and this has been the same for years. The ref may call that, and one ref may call it, and another ref may not. It depends on what they saw. Was this person doing it constantly all race for no apparent reason? Were they just going from, did they go from 12 meters to 8 meters? There's lots of things that factor in, but I certainly, as an athlete, and you guys know me, I mean, I was a swimmer cyclist who sucked on the run. And so my selfish agenda was drafting. I did not want my peers to draft, to catch up to me on the bike, or to save energy for the run. So, that said, I would not have wanted to be given a penalty the second for a reason that was out of my control and unavoidable by me, that I encroached into the draft zone fractionally of the person in front of me. So it has to still be a judgment call. You can't just download the data from the device and assess penalties afterwards. You can't just do that. Maybe in the future, depending on, once we get a better idea of the validity of the data, which is so awesome, the stuff that Race Ranger can record, and we'll figure out a way to use that in a helpful manner as far as officiating goes. But the calls have to be made in that moment currently, and by a referee. So the lights, much like the reflectors in Kona, make the draft zone a lot more objective for the athletes and for the refs. The tricky part comes in, the ref's tolerance, and so you're still not going to get away from the contention of, hey, why did I get a penalty for going into the draft zone and out of the draft zone and so didn't? Unfortunately, that's going to always be there. The difference now is that no one's going to be able to say they didn't, and if you ask me, pro athletes were not being penalized for, let's face it. I mean, you had to get a drafting penalty, it wasn't because you were riding 11.5 meters behind somebody, right? And you were within 12 meters, most definitely. So now everyone's going to know. You're not going to be able to say that. You're still going to be able to say, why me? Just like, when the cop pulls you over for speeding, why me? I'm going the same speed as everybody else. You don't like my vehicle? What is it? So they're still going to be able to say that, but I think we the refs' decisions are judgment calls, just like a lot of professional sports, and the more eyeballs that are on us now, the more there's that ability to have that water cooler talk. You're a fan of one person, you're like, yeah, that dude deserved the penalty, and you're a fan of the other person, you're like, that's a BS call, almost cussed on your show. So that's still going to be there, and maybe even more so. Whether the call should have been made by the ref, or a call that wasn't made should have been made, or a call that was made shouldn't have been made. Those things are going to be out there still, but I feel like we're giving the pros the opportunity now to minimize their risk of getting a penalty, because brilliantly, Race Ranger has these 3 series of lights, and so you're going to know when you're close. And you should do what most of the pros do already in our races now. They leave a buffer, and the only time they push the boundaries of that buffer is when somebody's trying to pass and they don't want them to slide in, and then they close it up to as close to 12 as they can get. And the ability to do that still exists, but you're going to be able to be more precise now and more careful when there's 4 of you riding, and you're happy with the order of those 4. So I think it's going to be a big help, but I'm talking more than I should about to answer your question, Ryan, but it's not a simple issue, but ultimately I think Race Ranger is going to be a big help. And I hope that the pros use it not to see how close they can ride to 12 meters, right? And I hope that the referees officiating our events figure out a way to communicate to the pros like what their tolerance level is going to be with respect to minor incursions in and out of that draft zone. But the person that's sitting at 8 meters and is seen doing that, their lights flashing red all the time, it's a no-brainer for the refs. And the
Who's
athlete
ultimately
can't reason it away.
responsible for the refs that Jimmy, who's ultimately responsible for the referees that show up to Ironman events? Do you pick them? Who picks them?
It depends. In the U.S., we've been able to whoever because of the volume of events we have in the U.S., we've always sort of had a person that we call the North American head ref, and that person assigns head referees to the other events. So we have a relationship with the majority of the refs that officiate our events because we see them every year. I personally see them every year, and I have a lot of oversight and not oversight. I have a lot of I have the ability to provide input on the way I think refs should officiate and the way that Ironman wants them to officiate. We're all very process oriented. At the end of the day, though, the refs make the calls, right? And so the focus for me is to make sure you're technically correct with all the calls that you make, and that your focus is on fair play. Safety is always a factor, but we don't want people to get an unfair advantage, and you guys are the ones that have to figure out whether that's happening. I'm not on the motorcycle with a blue and yellow card anymore.
Yeah. Are there statistics that are kept on what referees call what penalties for, and are those measured at all over time to
Not
have
formally,
some sort of a judge card?
not formally, but the contentious calls are, if they're known to you and Slowtwitch fans, they're known to us. But obviously, a lot of times the viewpoint from the officiating team doesn't really align with. And again, you guys, it goes back to communication and us doing trying to speak to the actual issues of why the penalty was given. The technical issues, but people are always going to spin their version of what happened. And one of the world championships, we had 3 drafting penalties called, but you would have thought, kind of going back to something you said earlier, that the entire field was penalized. It's just that those 3 people, were talked about their version of what happened. And for the most part, refs in all sports don't do the same, right? The narrative is skewed.
There's no ledger kept with like, hey, this is Ironman Oceanside 70.3, and at the end of the day, here were the penalties that were given out and to what athletes they were given to?
Yeah, no, that
Is
ledger is
there,
there, but there's not a rate sheet, a referee
okay,
X over
but
the course of the year.
but it, but it, but it, but it exists, right? So if you took that data, speaking of data, that would be interesting to like, but if you took that data and you did that at every single race, then wouldn't you have a pretty good idea of not only the athletes that love to push the rules, but maybe also the referees that love to really enforce some rules?
Yeah, no, and yes, I don't think I think that information is available. The head refs that we use, certainly in North America, and I'm sure it's the same around the world. They're going to use the people that they feel are the best, and that come into this with the attitude of everybody's a number on race day. You don't have an agenda, and you don't want to have an agenda. Are there people that push the limit? Yeah, and are those people going to be scrutinized a little bit more closely than others? Sometimes that's already happening, Eric. You keep your eyes on people that push the limit, or
I know it.
or people
I know it is.
yeah, people that aren't scrutinized. They're too far back in the group, but it's like, hey, this person rode, you know, okay, they're in a place where they got 30th in the race. They never saw the front, but they were right on my wheel the whole time. That feedback comes in,
Yeah.
and so maybe a ref will take a look at that person, and but for the most part, the referees focus on the race, the primary race, and I think the strategies that are employed are, let's try to be as present as we can be for the entire pro field, and if we're sitting there, they're going to behave. And really that's what happens. It's just, unfortunately, when somebody breaks a rule in a way that just can't be ignored, you know, it's again, it's not like they're getting penalties for riding one bike length away. They go into the draft zone and they fail to make a pass. That's technically a drafting violation. They slide in between two people who are 12 meters apart. It's technically a rule violation. And if referees let everyone do that, it becomes a free for all. So they got to make that call. And it's one of three calls that were made all day, but it's like, the refs are jerks, or it's rarely that the athletes are, and that's just sport, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not unique to triathlon. You know NFL, NBA, all those
Yeah.
sports have the same issue where the refs get bashed for doing their job. A lot of these things are judgment, and humans aren't perfect. And even with replay, a lot of these judgment calls, balls and strikes and baseballs, currently are not. If the ref gets it wrong, and we see that now with that box on the screen, it's still a strike, even though it was outside that little box. And anyway, sorry, I'm talking more than I should.
No, I mean, you've got a good point. And I don't, I wouldn't say that I know all of the USA refs by name, but I know who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're really passionate about what they do, and not in a, negative way. I don't think any of them are out there to, oh, get that person. Um, but I bet you if you ran statistics, you'd come up with information of this particular ref calls more of this than anybody else. And this
Mm-hmm.
ref calls more of these penalties more than anybody else. And I think that would be interesting to look at. I also think that, the pros would be the same way. That, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, there's a lot of pros that like to complain about certain penalties, and yet they continue to get the same penalty over and over again. And you're like, okay, well then
Well,
where is the
maybe,
real problem?
yeah.
Is it the
You
ref,
should,
or do you love to just push that envelope? And so across the
yeah,
board, I think it
yeah,
would be fascinating to dive into that, to where it's like, okay, if you're that innocent, then why have you been called, for drafting 10 times over the last 2 years in 4 different countries? Like, is it
yeah.
really the ref's problem, or is it the fact that you are just a really aggressive bike rider, right? Like, and
Yeah,
I'm just, because obviously it's a huge, like, this whole thing is a big talking point and has been in the industry primarily ever since live stream has been a big part of Ironman
mhm.
racing. And it's not going to go away, because the more television is brought into this, the more eyeballs are going to be on it, and the more, backseat quarterbacks like Ryan talked about, where it's like, well, I saw this person on TV wearing this shoe that isn't approved, and it was 2 months later, and I want them DQ'd. And so it's not going to go away. And so the conversation really has to be, it's like, okay, how do we get ahead of this? How do we make sure that everyone understands the rules the best that they can? And at that point, it's just kind of up to them of like, hey man, like, perfect example. When did you guys know you were going to change the rules for 2024? Was it November of last year, October? Was it March this year? Like, when did you know that this is coming out?
I don't think there was a specific date. We started looking at the rules at the end of the year and worked towards our standard deadline, to get the rules published ahead of Oceanside for the
Yeah.
2023 season. So there wasn't a specific day.
In the future, do you think that there's an opportunity to give more leeway on, hey, here are the rules and they're going to be changed, or they're going to be into effect 3 months from now, 4 months from now, instead of 6 weeks from now?
Yeah, I mean that possibility always exists. I think it's just got to be balanced with the day to day operations. I'm not trying to pass a buck, and your point
Sure.
is well taken. The more leeway, or the more lead time we can give athletes on, especially substantive changes, again, of which there really weren't any this year, the better. And so, yeah, point well taken, and it's certainly not lost on me and on us, but there's a lot going on. Again, not trying to pass the buck, and yeah, your point's well taken. And to go back to what you were saying before about the live streams and what we're seeing, to me the answer is kind of what we're doing now. It's just the commentary and having people that understand that, when a pro gets a penalty, they're gonna make sure that they tell their followers that, hey, I okay, yeah, I did what they said, but here's my reasons for it. Or the refs suck, and they don't know what we're going through, and they have no clue. They're going to say what they're going to say, right? There is a code of conduct that the athletes are supposed
Right.
to adhere to, but I think everybody, I have thick skin. I was once in their shoes, I didn't have the social media platform because I'm 60 years old a couple days ago. Um, it was different, the way we got our messaging out. But anyways, I get it. I get it. And they're talking about things more than we are. But with these live streams, we have the opportunity to explain, for our commentators to explain what calls were made, and find that out. You guys understand the issues, that it's not really known to the commentators, and so far it can't be what the person did. If typically stuff that we see on camera is the notification process, so the rule violation happened certainly sometime prior to that notification process. But all we can do is have people like do what you're doing right now, Eric, is just talking about it, and asking those questions. Is the problem, is it the ref and the officiating in this case? Is it the athlete? What is it? And just keep doing what we're doing. And um, I appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to talk, because our narrative, the feedback from the referee side isn't always told. So it's neat to have the opportunity to come and talk to you a little bit about that.
Well, we appreciate your time, Jimmy. I mean, I've been around the sport for a long time. Ryan's been around the sport for a long time. You've been in the sport longer than we have, and we've worked together for a really, really long time.
Yeah.
And you've always been straight and upfront, not only with me, but anyone that I've ever seen you personally interact with. And I know that you've got a lot of, people who have an opinion of you that I've never seen in the 20 years that I've been associated with you in some way, shape, or form. And I think it goes back to the conversation of, let's try to have the dialogue and the conversation of, okay, who really is in charge of the rules,
Yeah.
and where do they come from? Why are they, altered for certain, race organizations? What's the reasoning? And, start to educate the community on those types of things, so then
Mm-hmm.
they really can take responsibility for themselves to know where to go look for the
Yeah.
rules that they need to adhere to with doing the race. And if, and leaving the people that know the rules choose to, go to that line every single time with them, and, and then complain later when they obviously crossed
Yeah.
that line, and, blame you and everybody else under the sun for the
Mm-hmm.
fact that they, knew that they were speeding and they just didn't see the cop and they got caught.
Yeah.
But, the last thing that I would love to hear from you is, what advice would you have for a professional or age grouper of, if you have a question about, like, where do they go? Like, where's the best way where that they could go to figure out what the rules are so they could adhere to them? Where is that, Jimmy?
Damn it. You're going to make me say me. Um, I think with respect to the Ironman competition rules, yeah, they've got to get to me for an explanation. And like you said, I'm not one to shy away from those conversations. Happy to talk all day about rules. Like you said, Eric. I mean, I didn't sign up for this job to. I understood that it wasn't going to be the best thing for me. Certainly wasn't going to help my coaching business back when I was doing that as well. It's not something I did to be more popular. I understood based on my own experience that a lot of people are friends of mine are going to be angry with decisions that are made by refs at our event. So, but I feel strongly that you know rules officiating are important. They're part of our sport. They're not going away. And to your point, um, we just need to we need to everybody needs to communicate more so that more people are on the same page. And I would encourage people to reach out to me to get an explanation um, on any questions they have. And and to the point you were making just a second ago, we did and always do um, note our amendments or edits or clarifications to rules like we did here. Um, but obviously more clarification was necessary here, and even with the shoes last year, you guys did the same awesome job in helping us without even calling us interpret really what we were trying to accomplish and do, which was just that consistency. And and now bicycles and bicycle equipment are in the same place. Who thought that they'd make a running shoe that was that much better than a running shoe, right? A shoe with a carbon plate and big thick sole that literally made you a faster runner. And they had to figure out how to address that, and they came up with a way, and we're on board with that. We want to support that, and now our sport is in the same place with equipment, bicycle equipment specifically. We've got to sort of anticipate what's coming and get ahead of it and talk about it so that everybody knows. And I just again appreciate you guys let me ramble about that.
Now, I just wanted to be clear, when you say you guys, it's not Ryan and I, it's Slowtwitch as a whole, correct? I mean, we're talking about the Slow
Yeah, hey, that's not.
Twitchers, the forum members,
Yeah,
the people that are bringing all of the attention to
yeah.
the
I know
community. I want
the
to
I
give
know
them
the
the
Ryan.
credit because
Yes, they're my people. I don't. Unfortunately, I've got. Well, I can't even say I have two kids anymore because they're 20 and 22. But I can't use them as an excuse. I don't have time to engage, and a lot of it is every once in a while I go in and I chime in for clarity reasons, like you said. But some of the conversations are going to be never ending, and that's a good thing. And you guys know me, and I know Ryan probably knows how many times I go to the Slow Twitch site because there's so much. There's people there a hell of a lot smarter than I am. There's ideas that come through that forum that um, are really really good. There's some dumb ones too, but there are a lot. There's a lot of good stuff there, and it's my go-to site. No, not trying to blow smoke. Always has been. You guys know that, and way back in the day, Enfield thought allowed me to write some irreverent stories about my experiences as a triathlete, and forever indebted to him for that opportunity, and just grateful that there is a place where we can all go and debate and have for the most part, civil conversations about rules and athletes and events and whatnot. So yes, the people of Slow Twitch, yeah, super helpful commentary there, always.
awesome. Well, Jimmy, thanks for taking the time today. We appreciate it.
Well, yeah, it's good because I'm not going to have time anymore now that I'm going to get 1,000 emails about the rules. But
I,
so you
I,
guys,
I, I I'm pretty sure there's an easier way to get the rule book. We will look at that and make sure that that is on the homepage article instead of your email. We'll start with that first, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Thanks, Jimmy. Really appreciate it.